My sister crashed my new car, then smirked, "Mom and Dad will make you forgive me." They tried, until I pulled out the insurance report. Suddenly, she wasn't smiling anymore because she had no idea what I had done behind her back. I had spent years saving every extra dollar, skipping vacations to Myrtle Beach, ignoring impulse purchases at Target, and driving my beat-up 2011 Ford Focus into the ground just to finally afford the one thing I had always wanted, a brand new Honda Accord that was completely mine, paid for with my own hard-earned money. The moment I signed the paperwork at Davidson Honda in Charlotte and the dealer handed me those pristine keys, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pure, unfiltered pride in myself. I ran my fingers along the smooth, gleaming silver hood, inhaled the intoxicating scent of fresh leather seats, and thought, this is mine. Every single part of it is mine. I had barely owned the car for a full day before my younger sister Chloe decided that my happiness was hers for the taking. Chloe, who had been coddled and spoiled her entire life, had never worked for anything, never taken responsibility, and never faced a consequence that our parents couldn't sweep under the rug. She was the kind of person who treated other people's things as if they were hers by default, because that was the way life had always worked for her. When I pulled into our parents' driveway that evening in our suburb of Matthews to show them the car, Chloe was already there, leaning against the garage with that lazy, self-satisfied smirk she always wore. She barely even looked up from her phone as I parked. "Nice ride," she said, pushing herself off the wall and strolling over, peering through the driver's side window like she had already decided it belonged to her. "What's the mileage?" "Less than 100, I said, forcing myself to sound neutral, even though I could already feel my patience wearing thin. Chloe let out a low whistle, nodding appreciatively. Then, without asking, she reached for the handle and pulled the door open. "Let me take it for a spin." I immediately moved to shut the door before she could climb in, shaking my head firmly. "No way. I just got it. You're not driving it." Chloe rolled her eyes like I had just told her she couldn't borrow $1. "Oh, come on, Stella. Don't be such a control freak. It's just a car." "Exactly," I snapped. "It's just a car that I paid for with my own money. You don't get to take it." But Chloe had never been the kind of person to hear no and accept it. She just grinned, gave a little shrug, and backed away. But something about her expression sent a warning chill down my spine, like she already had a backup plan in motion. I should have trusted my instincts. Have you ever had a sibling who thought they could get away with anything? Let me know in the comments because I was done letting it slide. Later that night, I left my car keys on the entryway table for just a few minutes while I went upstairs to grab something from my room. When I came back down, the keys were gone and so was my car. My hands clenched into fists as realization sank in. "Chloe." I stormed outside, my heart hammering, but by then she was long gone, tires squealing in the distance. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail again and again. I was still fuming when 2 hours later, my phone finally rang, but it wasn't Chloe's number. It was an unknown caller. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A deep voice, calm but serious. "This is Officer Thompson with the Mecklenburg County Police Department. I'm calling regarding a vehicle registered under your name." I felt my stomach drop. "What happened?" "There's been an accident." A pause. "The driver is unharmed, but the vehicle sustained significant damage." My grip on the phone tightened. "Who was driving?" The officer hesitated for only a second before answering. "A young woman who identified herself as Chloe Rodriguez." I don't even remember driving to the scene of the crash. One moment I was standing in my parents' entryway, gripping my phone with white knuckles, and the next I was pulling up behind flashing police lights, my pulse a steady drum of rage. And there she was, my sister, standing next to what was left of my brand new Honda Accord, arms crossed, looking completely unfazed. The front bumper was destroyed, the hood crumpled in on itself, and one of the headlights was shattered. My beautiful, perfect car was ruined, and Chloe was standing there like it was nothing. I climbed out of my old beater, slamming the door harder than I meant to, my hands shaking as I marched up to her. "What the hell did you do?" Chloe finally turned to face me. And then, in the single most infuriating moment of my entire life, she smirked. "That sucks," she said, shrugging like she had just dropped my ice cream cone instead of wrecking my car. "But hey, don't freak out. Mom and Dad will make you forgive me." I felt the words hit me like a slap across the face. Mom and Dad will make me forgive her. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of what she had done. It was a smug, arrogant declaration that no matter how angry I was, no matter how much damage she had caused, it wouldn't matter because our parents would smooth it over just like they always did. I took a slow, measured breath, my fists clenched at my sides, my pulse thundering in my ears. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her get away with it this time. Not this time. Have you ever had a sibling who thought they could get away with anything? Let me know in the comments because I was done letting it slide. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache, my body still tense from the sheer frustration of the night before. My mind replaying every single detail of that awful encounter at the crash site. Chloe's smirking face haunted me like a nightmare that refused to end. My car, my beautiful hard-earned brand new Accord, was gone, destroyed in an instant by someone who had never worked a day in her life. Someone who had never faced a single consequence. Someone who genuinely believed that my anger was nothing more than an inconvenience to her day. I knew before I even stepped out of bed that my parents would be calling me, that they would be demanding a conversation, that they would try to smooth this over like they always did, as if Chloe's actions were just another minor mistake that we could all forget about if I would only be reasonable, like a good daughter should. Sure enough, the moment I checked my phone, I saw 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text message from Chloe that was so breathtakingly arrogant, I had to read it twice just to believe my own eyes. Stop being dramatic, Stella. It's just a car. Mom and Dad said we'll figure it out, so quit acting like it's the end of the world. There was no apology, no remorse, not even the slightest acknowledgement that she had done something wrong. Just pure entitlement dripping from every word, as if the real problem wasn't that she had stolen and crashed my property, but that I had dared to make a big deal out of it. I swallowed my rage, forcing myself to breathe slowly, reminding myself that getting worked up over a text message wouldn't help me now. Chloe had always been this way, and I knew exactly where she had learned it. I drove to my parents' house, my knuckles white against the steering wheel of my ancient backup car, my stomach twisting with a mix of anger and exhaustion, already knowing exactly how this conversation was going to go. I walked in without knocking, not bothering with pleasantries, finding my parents sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, their expressions a perfect mixture of forced concern and thinly veiled exasperation, as if I were the problem here, as if my reaction was the thing that needed to be fixed. Chloe sat slouched in one of the chairs, scrolling through her phone, looking completely unbothered, like she was waiting for this whole thing to blow over so she could move on with her life while I was left to pick up the pieces of what she had ruined. Mom sighed heavily, setting down her coffee cup like she was already exhausted by my presence, rubbing her temples as if she were the victim in all of this. Stella, honey, we need to talk about this situation because this anger you're holding on to isn't healthy for anyone. I felt something cold settle in my chest, something quiet but dangerous, a slow burning fury that I had carried for years but had never fully allowed myself to acknowledge until now. My anger. I repeated, my voice unervingly calm. You think my anger is the problem here? I continued, my hands resting on the back of an empty chair, gripping the wood so tightly that my fingers ached. Mom let out a long sigh, exchanging a quick glance with Dad, their silent communication making it painfully clear that they were united in this, that their decision had already been made before I'd even walked through the door. Sweetheart, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum over a broken toy, it's just a car. Chloe didn't mean to crash it. And we don't think it's fair to punish her so harshly for something that was clearly an accident. I felt something inside me snap, something that had been held together by sheer force of will for years, something that had been stretched and pulled and torn one too many times. She stole it, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, because if I let myself feel anything, I knew I would explode. I told her no. She took my keys anyway. She stole my car, wrecked it, and then smirked in my face because she knew you would cover for her, just like you always do. Chloe let out a dramatic sigh, finally looking up from her phone, rolling her eyes like this entire conversation was beneath her. Jesus, Stella, you're acting like I murdered someone, she muttered, shaking her head, her arrogance radiating off her in waves. I made a mistake. Okay? Chill out. Dad reached out, placing a gentle hand on mine, his eyes pleading, his expression carefully crafted into something that looked like love, but was really just manipulation wrapped in a prettier package. Stella, you're her sister, he said softly, tilting his head like he was speaking to a toddler in need of correction. I know you're upset, but family forgives, sweetheart. That's what we do. We forgive each other. I stared at him, at the sheer audacity of those words. At the way he had so effortlessly placed the responsibility on me to fix what Chloe had done, like my feelings were an inconvenience. Like my hard work meant nothing. Like my sacrifices didn't matter as long as Chloe was happy. I realized in that moment that I had spent my entire life being conditioned to accept this treatment, to believe that my needs came second, that my anger was unjustified, that my pain was something I had to swallow quietly for the sake of keeping the family peace. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into submission this time. So, I did something I'd never done before. I smiled. It was small, just a flicker of amusement, but it was enough to make my father pause. Enough to make Chloe glance at me with something almost resembling suspicion. "You know what?" I said, my voice light, my expression deceptively calm, because I had already made up my mind. "You're absolutely right, Dad. Family forgives, and I don't want to hold on to this anger anymore." I watched as relief flooded their faces, as Chloe's smirk returned, as they all leaned back in their chairs, convinced that they had won. But they had no idea what I was planning. I had spent my entire life being told that family comes first, that forgiveness is a virtue, that holding grudges only leads to bitterness. But as I sat in my car outside the State Farm office, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, I realized that those rules had only ever applied to me. Chloe had never been expected to forgive or compromise or sacrifice. Because Chloe had never faced real consequences. Not once, not ever. Not in all the years she had coasted through life on a wave of other people cleaning up her messes. But that was about to change. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one left picking up the pieces. When I walked into the insurance office, the air conditioning blasted against my skin, a stark contrast to the fire simmering in my chest, the calculated rage that had been fueling me since the moment Chloe had sneered in my face and told me our parents would make me forgive her. The man at the desk barely looked up as he typed something into his computer, his voice clipped and professional as he asked how he could help. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking, knowing that once I set this in motion, there would be no going back. "I need to file a claim for my car," I said, keeping my tone even, my expression carefully neutral. He nodded, clicking a few more times before glancing up at me. "Was it an accident? Do you have a police report?" "Yes, there's a report," I said, my pulse steady, my decision unwavering, "and I need to report it as unauthorized use." That made him pause. He blinked once, tilting his head slightly as if trying to determine whether he had misheard me. "Unauthorized use?" he repeated, his voice laced with a note of curiosity. "Are you saying your vehicle was stolen?" I could have said yes, but I knew better than to lie outright, especially when the truth was just as damning. "I never gave permission for her to take it," I clarified, choosing my words carefully, making sure there was no room for misinterpretation. "I explicitly told her she couldn't drive my car, and she took it anyway. That's theft, isn't it?" The man hesitated for only a second before nodding slowly, typing something into his system, his gaze flicking toward the screen as he read through what I assumed were company policies on situations like this. "If you can provide proof that you denied her permission, and she took the vehicle regardless, then yes, this qualifies as unauthorized use." I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone, my fingers moving swiftly as I pulled up the text messages from Chloe, the ones where I had told her no, the ones where she had laughed it off like my words meant nothing. I turned the screen toward him, watching as he read over the messages, his eyebrows raising slightly before he nodded again. "This should be sufficient," he said, his voice now purely professional. "Since you're filing for unauthorized use, the liability will not fall on you. It will transfer to the driver." Chloe. The liability would transfer to Chloe. The reality of it sank in slowly, like warm honey drizzling over the cold steel of my fury, coating it in something rich and satisfying. Chloe, who had spent her entire life escaping responsibility, would finally have to answer for something. Chloe, who had laughed in my face and told me I would have to forgive her, was about to learn what it felt like when the world didn't bend to her will. "How much are we talking about?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though inside my heart was thrumming with a strange, unfamiliar thrill. The man glanced at his screen, adjusting his glasses before answering. "Well, given the extent of the damage, the estimated total she'll be responsible for is somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. $30,000 to $40,000. I exhaled slowly, absorbing the number, letting it roll over me like a wave of pure vindication. Chloe had never had to deal with anything more than a slap on the wrist, never had to truly face the weight of her actions. But now that weight was about to come crashing down on her, and I wasn't going to lift a single finger to stop it. Later that night, I sat in my apartment scrolling through social media, my eyes narrowing as I landed on Chloe's latest post. A picture of her and her friends at some trendy restaurant in Southend, drinks in hand, her caption as arrogant as ever, "Tough day, but nothing a few drinks can't fix. Some people need to chill out and move on. Life's too short to stress about little things." Little things. That was what she called it. The sheer audacity of it sent a ripple of laughter through me, a sound so foreign that it startled me for a moment before I leaned back against the couch, shaking my head in amusement. Chloe thought she had won. She thought this was over. She thought our parents had bailed her out once again, that everything was going to go back to normal, that I had simply swallowed my anger and moved on like I always had before. But what Chloe didn't know, what she wouldn't know until that insurance claim finished processing, was that this time I wasn't letting it go. This time, Chloe was going to learn the hard way. And by the time she realized what I had done, it would already be too late. Sitting at the dinner table 3 days later, I could already feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, thick and suffocating, as if they had collectively decided that tonight would be the night I finally fell back in line. My father had set the table like it was a holiday gathering. Candles flickering in their holders, the smell of baked chicken and cornbread filling the air, his way of making it clear that this was meant to be a family moment, a night of reconciliation, a scene carefully crafted to smooth over what they viewed as an unnecessary conflict. But as I sat there, my hands resting in my lap, a thick envelope pressed between my fingers beneath the table, I felt nothing but an eerie sense of calm, because unlike them, I already knew how this dinner was going to end. Chloe was the first to speak, her voice dripping with a kind of arrogance that had been nurtured since childhood, her words laced with condescension, her smirk widening as she leaned back in her chair. "So, have you calmed down? Or are you still planning to throw a tantrum over a stupid car?" The words barely registered, barely stirred anything inside me, because I had already expected them, already prepared for the way she would turn this into a joke. I simply tilted my head, offering her a small, unreadable smile, watching as her confidence grew in the face of what she assumed was submission. My father let out a dramatic sigh, the kind that was meant to sound exasperated but gentle. "Stella, sweetheart, I know this has been a stressful situation for you, but we really need to put this behind us as a family. Chloe made a mistake, but you holding on to this anger isn't going to fix anything." My mother nodded along as she cut into her chicken, speaking without even looking up from her plate. "Life is too short to get caught up in things like this, Stella. At the end of the day, it's just a car. Things can be replaced. Family can't." I could feel the satisfaction radiating off Chloe, could practically see the way she was relishing in my supposed defeat, her ego inflating with every passing second, her smirk growing more insufferable by the minute. "Seriously, sis, you need to chill. I swear you've always been like this, overreacting, making everything a huge deal. I mean, come on. I crashed a car. Not your entire life. You'll get over it." It was in that moment, as she let out an amused chuckle, as my father reached across the table to place a reassuring hand over mine, as my mother gave a small nod of approval at Chloe's words, that I finally moved. I reached beneath the table, pulled the envelope into view, and placed it directly in front of Chloe with deliberate precision. The sound of thick paper hitting the polished wood was loud enough to make all three of them pause. Chloe barely spared it a glance, her smirk still firmly in place as she shook her head, rolling her eyes like I was being dramatic. "What's this?" "Some angry letter about how I hurt your feelings." "Read it," I said simply, my voice even, my expression unreadable. Something in my tone must have caught her attention, because for the first time that night, her amusement wavered, her smirk faltering just slightly as she reached for the envelope, fingers hesitating for only a second before tearing it open. The moment she pulled out the papers, the moment her eyes scanned the words printed across the top, the color drained from her face so quickly that it was almost satisfying to watch. I watched in silence as her hands tightened around the pages, as her mouth opened and closed without sound, as her entire posture shifted from smug arrogance to quiet, dawning horror. "What did you do?" Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. I took a sip of my water, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of reality to settle onto Chloe's shoulders. "That, dear sister, is your $38,000 wake-up call.